3 breeding facilities rejected him. Texas, Colorado, Montana, all said the same thing. This $200,000 bull was worthless, unmanageable, impossible. Send him to auction. But here's what nobody could explain. Judah didn't attack. He didn't rage or resist. He just chose. Some handlers he'd work with. Others he'd turn his entire body away from. A deliberate dismissal that terrified an industry built on control. A bull worth more than most houses was deciding who deserved his cooperation, and the breeding world had no protocol for an animal who refused to be managed. Then a veterinarian specializing in animal consciousness arrived. She didn't bring sedatives or restraints. She brought silence. For over an hour, she just stood outside his pen and watched. And Judah, the bull 3 facilities called impossible, walked straight to her, not in aggression, in recognition, like he'd been waiting his entire life for someone who understood the difference between studying an object and meeting someone. What she said next changed everything. 6 words. Not dramatic words, not complicated words, but words that shattered how we understand intelligence, consciousness, and worth in animals we've bred to serve us. This is the story of how a bull deemed worthless by an entire industry became proof that sometimes the problem isn't the animal who won't comply, it's the system that can't imagine partnership. 3 facilities saw a management problem. 1 veterinarian saw a conscious mind. That difference didn't just save Judah, it changed science forever. In the cold precision of the genetic cattle industry, some animals are worth more than houses. Judah was supposed to be worth more than most. A Brahmin bull from one of the oldest bloodlines in North America, Judah had been bred specifically to become what the industry called a foundation sire, the kind of animal whose genetics would shape breeding programs for decades. His lineage was impeccable. His physical conformation was textbook perfect. His DNA analysis showed markers that geneticists spent careers searching for. On paper, Judah was a goldmine. In practice, he was something else entirely. The first rejection came from Redcrest Genetics in Amarillo, Texas, the largest commercial breeding operation in the Southwest. They'd paid $200,000 for Judah when he was 18 months old, confident they were acquiring the future of their Brahmin program. 6 weeks later, they sent him back. The official report, filed with the American Brahmin Breeders Association, cited behavioral incompatibility with standard collection protocols. Reading between the carefully neutral language, what they meant was simpler. Judah wouldn't cooperate. But that wasn't quite accurate either. Judah didn't fight. He didn't charge handlers or damage equipment. He didn't display any of the aggressive resistance that breeding facilities were equipped to handle. What Judah did was more unsettling than aggression. He waited. When technicians approached with halters and lead ropes, Judah would stand perfectly still, watching. Not the blank stare of a typical bull, but something more focused. Assessing. When they moved to his left, his eyes tracked them. When they spoke, his ears swiveled to catch the sound. And when they reached for him, sometimes he'd comply, sometimes he wouldn't. There was no pattern the handlers could identify, no trigger they could predict. Judah seemed to operate on criteria only he understood. It's like he's deciding whether we're worth his time, one frustrated technician had written in an incident report. The comment was dismissed as anthropomorphization, projecting human traits onto an animal. But the technician knew what he'd seen. Redcrest returned Judah to the broker who'd sold him, citing breach of behavioral standards. The broker, a man named Marcus Holt, who'd been in the cattle genetics business for 30 years, was baffled. He'd handled Judah multiple times with no issues. The bull had always been calm, cooperative even. Maybe it's the facility, Marcus suggested to his assistant. Some animals don't do well in high-stress environments. Let's try somewhere smaller, more hands-on. The second placement was High Plains Reproductive Center in Fort Morgan, Colorado. They specialized in smaller operations, personalized service, what they marketed as artisanal genetics. They were thrilled to get a bull of Judah's caliber at a discount, his previous behavioral issues notwithstanding. 3 months later, they too sent him back. This rejection was different. The report didn't cite behavioral incompatibility. Instead, it referenced unpredictable engagement patterns and selective compliance inconsistent with commercial viability. What they meant, though they didn't say it directly, was that Judah had become more selective, not less. He would work with certain handlers, but not others. He would enter the breeding chute on some days but refuse on others, despite identical conditions. When he did comply, his fertility markers were excellent. When he didn't, no amount of standard cattle management, from food incentives to pressure techniques, made any difference. "He's not a pet," the facility director had said during a tense conference call with Marcus. "This is a commercial operation. We can't have a $200,000 bull who decides when he feels like working." Marcus took Judah back again, this time with growing concern. 2 rejections from reputable facilities wasn't just unusual, it was unheard of for an animal with Judah's genetics and physical health. There was nothing wrong with the bull medically. Every veterinary examination came back perfect. His fertility was confirmed. His temperament, according to standard behavioral assessments, was within normal parameters. Yet somehow, he kept failing. Marcus made one last attempt. North Valley Breeding Facility in Bozeman, Montana, was considered the gold standard. A research-oriented operation that worked with universities, maintained the highest welfare standards, and employed staff with advanced degrees in animal science. If anyone could work with Judah, it would be them. They kept him for 2 months. The rejection letter, when it came, was the most detailed yet. It described Judah as cognitively atypical, exhibiting choice-based behavior patterns inconsistent with commercial breeding applications. The letter noted that Judah demonstrated clear discrimination between individuals, contexts, and procedures, and that this level of environmental assessment, while fascinating from a research perspective, was incompatible with the operational requirements of a commercial genetics program. In other words, Judah was too smart for his own good. "He's not broken," the head of North Valley told Marcus in a follow-up call. "He's just different. And different doesn't work in this industry. We need predictability. We need animals who respond to standard protocols. Judah responds to something else entirely, and we don't have time to figure out what that is." That was when Marcus knew he was out of options. 3 facilities, 3 rejections. In the genetics industry, that was the kiss of death. Word would spread. No reputable breeding operation would touch Judah now, no matter how good his bloodlines were. The protocol at this point was clear. Send the animal to auction, recoup whatever money possible, move on. Marcus had done it dozens of times with animals who had legitimate health or behavioral problems. It was just business. But Judah didn't have health problems. He didn't have behavioral problems, at least not in any conventional sense. He had something else. Something that made people uncomfortable precisely because it was unfamiliar. Marcus sat in his office staring at Judah's file when his assistant knocked on the door. "The auction house called," she said. "They're ready to schedule Judah whenever we want to send him." Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled up the video footage from North Valley, surveillance clips they'd sent along with their rejection documentation. He'd watched these clips a dozen times, trying to understand what he was missing. In one clip, Judah stood in a holding pen while a technician approached with collection equipment. The technician was new, nervous, his movements uncertain. Judah watched him for 30 seconds, then deliberately turned and walked to the far corner of the pen, positioning himself where the technician couldn't reach him without significant effort. In another clip, a different handler, one of the facility's most experienced staff, entered the same pen. Judah immediately walked toward him, calm and cooperative. The collection process went smoothly, efficiently, textbook perfect. Same bull, same pen, same procedure, different people, different outcome. It wasn't random, it was never random. Judah was making decisions based on criteria the industry didn't acknowledge animals could have. Marcus closed the video file and looked at his assistant. "Before we schedule the auction, there's one more thing I want to try." She looked surprised. "Another facility? Boss, nobody's going to take him after 3 rejections. You know how this industry works." "Not another facility," Marcus said. "I want an independent behavioral evaluation, someone outside the breeding industry, someone who specializes in unusual cases." His assistant's expression shifted from surprise to skepticism. "Like a specialist? That's going to be expensive, and we're already deep in the hole with this bull." "I know," Marcus said, "but something about this doesn't sit right with me. 3 facilities, Dozens of handlers, hundreds of interactions, and the only consistent variable is that Judah behaves inconsistently. That's not normal animal behavior. That's not even problematic animal behavior. That's something else. He thought for a moment, then pulled up a contact he'd been given years ago at a conference. A veterinarian who specialized in what she called complex animal cognition. He'd never had reason to call her before. Until now. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore answered on the third ring. When Marcus explained the situation, carefully, methodically, trying not to sound like he'd lost his mind, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You're describing an animal who exhibits selective engagement based on individual discrimination and environmental assessment," Dr. Whitmore said finally, her voice thoughtful. "That's not a behavioral problem. That's intelligence." Marcus felt something shift in his understanding. "So what do I do with that?" "Let me come see him," Dr. Whitmore said. "Don't send him to auction yet. Give me 3 days. If I can't figure out what's happening, you're no worse off than you are now." Marcus agreed, hung up the phone, and looked back at Judah's file. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if he was making a terrible mistake. Throwing good money after bad on a bull the industry had already written off. But he also wondered something else. What if they'd all been asking the wrong question? What if the problem wasn't that Judah was difficult to manage? What if the problem was that they'd been trying to manage him in the first place? Dr. Eleanor Whitmore arrived on a Tuesday morning in a dusty Subaru that smelled of hay and antiseptic. Late 40s, gray streaking through dark hair, weathered hands from decades of fieldwork. Marcus Holt met her with a thick file of documentation under his arm. "Thank you for coming," he started. "I've compiled all the reports." "I don't want to see those yet," Dr. Whitmore interrupted, not unkindly. "Those will tell me what other people saw. I need to see what's actually there first, unfiltered." She followed Marcus to the quarantine pen where Judah stood under shelter. 2,000 pounds of silver-gray Brahmin watching their approach with focused attention that made Marcus slow his pace. Dr. Whitmore didn't slow down. She walked directly to the fence and simply stood there. "There's a gate if you want to go inside," Marcus offered. "I won't need to, not today." She glanced at him. "However long this takes." Marcus left her there, alone with the bull that had cost him a fortune and 3 facility relationships. For an hour, Dr. Whitmore didn't move. She stood outside the fence, hands in pockets, and observed. No notes, no camera, just watching. Judah remained in his corner, but his posture had changed. Head up, ears forward, attention locked on the woman who hadn't moved. They stayed like that, 2 observers observing each other, as morning sun climbed higher. Around the 45-minute mark, something shifted. Judah adjusted his weight. Not turning away, not approaching. Just a subtle recalibration. Dr. Whitmore mirrored the movement with such precision that Marcus, watching from his office window, felt a chill run down his spine. Judah tilted his head slightly left. Dr. Whitmore tilted hers left. It wasn't training. It was conversation. Nonverbal. Operating on a frequency Marcus couldn't hear. After an hour, Judah took 3 steps forward. Stopped. Lowered his head, not submission, but acknowledgement. Then he moved slowly toward the fence, path curved and cautious, until he was 15 feet away. He made a sound. Low, questioning, seeking confirmation. Dr. Whitmore responded with a similar vocalization. Judah's ears pricked with interest. Then she moved for the first time, 1 step back from the fence, creating space, giving him room. Judah responded immediately, taking 2 steps closer. They continued this dance, advance and retreat, question and answer, until Judah stood directly at the fence, close enough to touch. Dr. Whitmore crouched down, making herself smaller, non-threatening, patient. Judah lowered his massive head until his face was level with hers, separated only by metal bars. They stayed eye to eye for several minutes. Then Dr. Whitmore stood, nodded once, and walked away without looking back. Judah watched her disappear around the building. Marcus was waiting in his office, coffee gone cold. What was that? The most important diagnostic tool. Listening. Dr. Whitmore sat down, pulling out a notebook. Now I'd like to see those reports. She read quickly through the documentation from all 3 facilities, occasionally making notes. Finally, she closed the folder. All 3 approached Judah the same way, as an asset to be managed, a resource to be controlled. Standard cattle management, pressure and release, routine and repetition, perfectly legitimate for typical breeding stock. She paused. But not for Judah. These reports describe selective engagement, individual discrimination, environmental assessment. They're describing advanced cognitive processing. But cattle can't. Most cattle can't, Dr. Whitmore interrupted. But occasionally you get an individual wired differently. When it happens in a species we've domesticated for commodity production, the animal doesn't fit the system, and the system doesn't know what to do with that. Marcus leaned back. So Judah is too smart for the breeding industry? Judah has a level of self-awareness and decision-making capacity the industry isn't designed to accommodate. He evaluates situations and people, then makes choices. Some handlers approach with respect and patience. He cooperates. Others don't, and Judah opts out. She looked at him directly. Trying to force him into commercial breeding will keep producing the same result. Then what am I supposed to do with a $200,000 bull who's too smart for his own good? Dr. Whitmore was quiet, looking toward the pen. There's a research program at Colorado State University studying animal cognition. They document cases of exceptional cognitive capacity in domestic animals. Judah would be perfect. Not as breeding stock, but as a research subject. Lifetime care, contributing important data to understanding animal intelligence. Would they pay for him? Enough to cover your losses. More importantly, Judah would have a good life with people who understand his difference isn't a defect. Can you set it up? I already called them. They're very interested. Someone can come next week. Marcus laughed tiredly. Confident I'd agree? Hopeful you'd see this isn't about a bull with a problem. It's about a bull who deserves better than being told his intelligence is an inconvenience. She stood to leave, then paused. Before they come, spend time with him. Not as a broker evaluating an asset. Just spend time. Let him decide if he wants to engage. You'll understand then. After she left, Marcus walked to the quarantine pen and sat on the ground outside the fence. Judah turned his head to look at him. Marcus didn't call or gesture, just sat and waited. For 20 minutes, Judah didn't move. Then, slowly, deliberately, he walked over and lowered his head until his nose was inches from the fence. They stayed like that, man and bull, separated by metal but not by misunderstanding, as afternoon sun cast long shadows. And Marcus finally saw Judah clearly, not as a failed investment or problematic asset, but as what Dr. Whitmore had said, an animal too intelligent to be controlled, too valuable to be discarded, who'd been waiting for someone to stop trying to manage him and start trying to understand him instead. The team from Colorado State arrived 6 days later in an unmarked van carrying monitoring equipment and research protocols. 3 people, Dr. James Chen, head of the Animal Cognition Lab, his research assistant, a graduate student named Kira Patel, and Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, who'd agreed to facilitate the evaluation. Marcus watched from his office as they set up observation stations around Judah's pen, cameras on tripods, tablets for real-time notation, a portable ultrasound for non-invasive health assessment. They worked with the quiet efficiency of people who'd done this dozens of times. Dr. Chen was methodical, clinical. He reviewed Judah's file on his tablet, occasionally glancing at the bull through the window. 3 rejections from commercial facilities. Behavioral assessments cite selective compliance, individual discrimination. He looked at Dr. Whitmore. You're confident this isn't aggression or fear-based resistance? I'm certain, she replied. Watch. For the first hour, the team simply observed from outside the pen, taking notes, recording baseline behavior. Judah stood in his usual corner, watching them with that same focused attention Marcus had come to recognize. Not vacant, not anxious, assessing. Kira was the first to notice. He's tracking each of us individually, not as a group. See how his eyes move? He's cataloging us. Doctor. Chen adjusted his glasses, studying his tablet where thermal imaging showed Judah's calm physiological state. Heart rate steady, respiration normal, no stress indicators. Interesting. Most bulls in observation scenarios show elevated stress responses. He's completely relaxed. Because he's not being threatened, Dr. Whitmore said quietly. He's being witnessed. There's a difference. After 90 minutes, Dr. Chen made a decision. I'm going in. Standard approach protocol, slow movements, non-threatening posture, no direct eye contact initially. He entered through the south gate, carrying nothing, hands visible. Judah turned his head to watch, but didn't move from his position. Dr. Chen walked to the center of the pen and stopped, giving Judah space to decide what happened next. Nothing happened for 3 full minutes. Then Judah did something that made Kira gasp audibly. He turned his entire body away from Dr. Chen, deliberately facing the opposite direction, and stood completely still. He's dismissing you, Kira said, astonished. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral, but Marcus saw the flicker of surprise. The scientist slowly backed out of the pen, careful not to make sudden movements. Once outside, he looked at Dr. Whitmore. He rejected me. He chose not to engage, Dr. Whitmore corrected. There's a difference. Let me try, Kira said suddenly. Dr. Chen hesitated, then nodded. Same protocol. If he shows any sign of aggression, he won't, Dr. Whitmore interrupted. Kira entered the pen, smaller than Dr. Chen, younger, moving with less certainty but more openness. She walked to the center, then did something different. She sat down on the ground, cross-legged, making herself as non-threatening as possible. Judah's head turned. His ears rotated toward her. For a long moment, nothing. Then slowly, deliberately, Judah walked across the pen until he stood 10 feet from where Kira sat. He lowered his head, not in aggression but in what looked like curiosity. Kira remained perfectly still, barely breathing. Judah took one more step, then another, until his massive head was close enough that Kira could have reached out and touched him. She didn't move, just sat there, tears streaming down her face, as 2,000 pounds of allegedly unmanageable bull stood peacefully beside a young woman he'd met 5 minutes ago. Outside the pen, Dr. Chen was frantically taking notes. I've never seen selection behavior this precise. He's not responding to size or status. He's responding to something else entirely. Dr. Whitmore watched through the fence, her expression unreadable. Intent. He's responding to intent. Dr. Chen approached with the goal of assessment, of studying an object. Kira approached with genuine curiosity about meeting someone. Judah knows the difference. Marcus felt something shift in his understanding. All this time, the facilities had been trying to manage Judah as livestock, but Judah wasn't refusing to be livestock. He was insisting on being treated as more. After 20 minutes, Kira slowly stood and walked out of the pen, her legs shaking. That was the most incredible experience of my life, she whispered. Dr. Chen looked at Dr. Whitmore. What's his prognosis? Can he function in any commercial capacity? No, Dr. Whitmore said flatly. He'll never function in commercial breeding. The industry requires predictable compliance. Judah requires mutual respect. So what happens to him? Dr. Whitmore turned to face the entire group. Dr. Chen, Kira, Marcus. Her voice was quiet but carried absolute certainty. He needs collaborative partnership, not management. 6 words. They landed in the space between them with the weight of revelation. Marcus felt them settle into his chest, rearranging everything he thought he understood about animals, intelligence, value, purpose. Dr. Chen lowered his tablet slowly. Kira's hand went to her mouth. Even Marcus, who'd been in the cattle business for 30 years, felt the ground shift beneath him. Because those 6 words didn't just describe what Judah needed. They described what the entire industry had been getting wrong, what every facility had missed, what every rejected animal might be trying to tell them if anyone bothered to listen. Judah didn't need to be fixed. He needed to be respected. And suddenly, the path forward was clear. The paperwork took 3 weeks. Marcus signed transfer documents that felt more like adoption papers than livestock transactions. Colorado State agreed to cover his financial losses and provide quarterly updates on Judah's participation in their cognition studies. But before Judah left, something unexpected happened. Dr. Chen returned with Kira and a proposal. We want to try something unconventional. Instead of standard research protocols where we design experiments for the subject, we'd like to see what happens if we let Judah participate in designing his own engagement. Marcus didn't understand. How does a bull design experiments? By choosing what interests him, Kira explained. She'd brought a collection of objects, puzzles, mirrors, different textures, sound-making devices. We present options. He decides what he wants to explore. We document his choices, his problem-solving approaches, his patterns of curiosity. They spent 2 weeks with Judah in what they called collaborative observation. The results astonished everyone. Judah showed preferences for certain puzzle types over others. He spent 40 minutes examining his reflection in a mirror, testing different angles, seemingly aware it was himself. When given sound devices, he learned which ones produced tones and deliberately created patterns, not random but intentional sequences. He's not just intelligent, Dr. Chen said during the final evaluation. He's creative, self-aware. He has preferences, curiosity, intent. Everything we'd recognize as markers of complex consciousness in any species. On the day Judah left for Colorado, Marcus stood at the trailer watching the bull he'd once seen only as a failed investment walk calmly up the ramp. Kira was there, speaking softly to him, and Judah responded with that same focused attention he'd shown Dr. Whitmore weeks ago. "You'll visit, right?" Kira asked Marcus. "If he wants me to," Marcus replied, finally understanding what that meant. As the trailer pulled away, Marcus thought about the 3 facilities that had rejected Judah, the countless handlers who'd tried to control him, the system that had almost discarded him entirely. They'd all been asking the wrong question. How do we make this bull comply? When the right question had always been, what does this bull need to thrive? The answer changed everything. Not just for Judah, but for Marcus, for the researchers, for anyone willing to see that sometimes the most valuable thing we can offer isn't control, it's respect, it's partnership, it's the willingness to be changed by what we're trying to understand. 3 facilities had rejected Judah for being impossible to manage. Colorado State embraced him for being impossible to ignore. And in doing so, they proved that the real problem had never been the bull who refused to be controlled. It was the system that couldn't imagine any other way. 18 months after Judah arrived at Colorado State, Dr. Chen published findings that changed animal cognition research forever. The paper, titled Collaborative Intelligence, Partnership Models in Non-Human Consciousness, documented Judah's participation in over 40 self-directed studies. The results were extraordinary. Judah had demonstrated problem-solving abilities on par with great apes, emotional intelligence comparable to elephants, and social discrimination more sophisticated than most documented in domestic animals. But more importantly, the research proved something the industry had never wanted to acknowledge. Some animals don't fail to adapt to systems. Systems fail to adapt to them. The paper went viral in academic circles, then mainstream media. Suddenly, the bull that 3 facilities had rejected became the face of a movement questioning how we define intelligence, value, and worth in animals we've bred for human purposes. Marcus visited Judah quarterly, always waiting at the fence to see if the bull would choose to approach. He usually did. Their relationship had become what Dr. Whitmore's 6 words predicted. Not management, but partnership. Marcus would sit, Judah would stand close by, and they'd exist together in understanding that required no control. Dr. Whitmore received calls from facilities across the country, asking her to evaluate other problem animals. More often than not, she found the same pattern. Highly intelligent individuals trapped in systems designed for predictability, not consciousness. Kira completed her doctorate studying Judah, then founded a consulting firm helping agricultural operations redesign protocols for cognitively complex animals. Her company's tagline came from the lesson Judah taught. What if they're not broken? What if we're just asking wrong? The 3 facilities that rejected Judah quietly revised their assessment protocols. They couldn't admit they'd been wrong, but they could prevent future mistakes. It was something. On a spring afternoon, 2 years after leaving Marcus's facility, Judah stood in a university pasture with other research animals, all former failures who'd found purpose in being understood rather than controlled. Dr. Chen watched from his office, still amazed by what he saw daily. "He changed everything," Kira said, standing beside him. "Not because he was difficult, because he refused to pretend he was anything less than he actually was." Dr. Chen nodded. 3 facilities saw a management problem. Dr. Whitmore saw consciousness. The difference between those perspectives changed one bull's life. He paused. And potentially thousands more. Because that's what Judah's legacy became. Not just proof that intelligence exists beyond what we acknowledge, but evidence that the most revolutionary act is sometimes simply refusing to be diminished. 3 facilities rejected him for being impossible to control. History will remember him for being impossible to dismiss. And somewhere in that difference lies the future of how we understand, value, and partner with the conscious beings we share this world with. The question was never, can animals like Judah adapt to our systems? The question was always, will we adapt our systems to animals like Judah? His story gave us the answer we needed. Not compliance, not control, respect, partnership, understanding, 6 words that changed everything.